If you're looking for a little inspiration or searching for some meaning in your musical work or have some doubts about your music production skills, or maybe you just want to reignite some passion in your music making, may I suggest my new book entitled What Bob Ross Teaches Us About Music Production. I've taken some words of wisdom from Bob Ross and translated them into music production tips and reminders and inspirational thoughts. There are 10 lessons over 33 pages, and it covers everything from finding your own voice to finding the joy in actually making music. There are 2 ways to get the book. You can head over to brianfunk.com and just purchase it for $3, or you can join the Music Production Club and get it as part of your membership. The Music Production Club is a subscription-based service where you get new music production tools in your mailbox every month, get some live packs, some sounds, video tutorials, and we have live online meetings where you can learn some new music production ideas and tips and tricks. So check all that stuff out at brianfunk.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have Anton Zytnik, and Anton is an Australian living in Berlin. He's a musician. I would categorize kind of like indie rock style stuff. I think we have similar musical upbringings and similar tastes. And Anton's here to tell us a little bit about what he does, and he's got some thoughts about staying productive and creative, some philosophical things, practical, technical ideas we can talk about, and I'm excited to share ideas and learn from each other. So I want to welcome you, Anton. Thank you for taking the time to talk.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And your musical project is called Orphan Train Project. Mm-hmm. And you've got quite a lot of releases on Bandcamp. I mean, it goes way back. So you've been at this for a while. You're obviously producing a lot of music and finishing stuff, which is always one of the challenges.
Yeah, I've been doing it now for almost 30 years. So I'm nearly 44 years old and started writing and making music when I was about 15 years old. I'm one in a long line of musicians who just felt this compelling need to make music in my mid-teens, and not being able to sing or play or write were just small details I didn't care too much about at the time. So I've been doing it a long time, and the material that's on Bandcamp is from varying stages in my recording history, sort of dating back to when I was recording with 2 tape decks to sort of 4-track era to digital 8-track era, and it's been about the past 16 years I've been recording on the computer and under the title Orphan Train Project.
That is actually very similar sounding to my own path. I mean, 14 years old, I started on guitar. Yep. We were kind of talking before. Enter Sandman was the first song I ever learned. It's just a great one, to learn because it's relatively simple for the intro.
Riff.
It's
pretty easy to learn, yeah.
And it's a cool riff. It's fun to play.
Can I ask, what was your first recording device? Like, what was the first thing you used to actually record music?
Well, the very first thing I ever used, I had this little boombox that you get as for a kid. It was called the Star Studio, and it had 2 tape decks, and it had this really cheap microphone. And when I was really young, my friends and I were making just silly tapes of us basically just screaming on tape, being silly idiots. But we did have when I look back now, there was this interest in making songs and recording things.
Sure.
So I think probably that was something I used in the very beginning. And I also just had one of those tape decks that they were just 1 unit, and you put the tape in. It's got a speaker and it's got the record button. Yep. I think people recorded meetings with them probably. Mm-hmm. And when I was first learning guitar, I would play chords and things on it and play over it. And as I started making songs, friends of mine and I would just play live into it. And we did get very interested in how certain recordings we didn't know how to describe it. We would just say like, well, that sounds so ferocious, you know. And then we would like maybe do another one, and it just didn't have the same energy. And it was really, I guess we were just saturating the tape, you know, overdriving the microphone and everything.
Sure.
But it was always like an interesting thing, like how that aggression would come across. But eventually, it was a 4-track tape recorder, which was amazing. It was a Tascam. They called it the meat and potatoes 4-track. It was 2 tracks that two inputs, and really simple. But it was great. I mean, to have that was just amazing.
So I recorded. This is getting really spooky because that was exactly my trajectory too. So I spent the first years till about 96 recording on 2 tape decks. So my older brother had like a boombox with an external microphone and an external input, which was critical. And I would record and sing and play, and then take the tape into my tape deck, run it back through an auxiliary input, and then just overdub 1 track. And I remember some of those moments were just the most exciting recording experiences, still to this day, just the amazement of just hearing yourself playing back over yourself, and that's how it was for many years. And then 96, my older brother and I got a Fostex 4-track, a Fostex multi-tracker, and that was my go-to machine for the next 4 or 5 years, and just hours and hours of music and tapes, and a big step forward from the old 2-track.
Yeah, we figured out a way to overdub using a karaoke machine at one point.
Oh, sweet.
So I guess the way those worked is you would play the music tape, and then you could actually record the music and the vocal at the same time. But we were then we were smart enough to figure out we could kind of just keep doing that, you know, like. Over and over. And I've actually, on my Bandcamp, I've actually released a few, like a collection of some vaguely passable recordings from that era, and they're pretty rough and raw, but there's something I like about them. I don't know what it is. I mean, one thing for certain is that it doesn't sound like anything. You know what I mean? Like, as I think you said before, you're perhaps trying to imitate the artists you admire, and you're incapable of doing so, and yet something comes out that is just completely you and completely different, and there's sort of a charm, a kind of an innocence to them, which is either charming or irritating depending on how you look at it. But I certainly enjoy sometimes just listening back to those old tapes when I'm feeling nostalgic. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely hear the excitement of actually being able to record, just like in the recordings, like just somehow that gets captured, because that was just thrilling when we realized we could record on top of our recording, you know, sound on sound type of thing. But
I agree.
Because it was like so low fidelity, every time you like redid that, so we'd record something and then put it in that karaoke machine or whatever, and then record something on top of it, which would basically permanently mix the two together. And then we'd take that tape and put it in the first tape deck, and then do it all over again. And it just like, each time you do that, the quality goes down like 85%. But in that though, all this like weird noise would almost start to sound like other instruments, and just like atmosphere. We always called it like the 4-track magic, when we would bounce the 3 tracks to one, and like it's like, well, what's that other instrument that no one played? It's just the way the stuff got glued together on the tape and mixed with all the noise.
Yeah, sure. And you know, a constant theme you talk about is committing to things and just, you know, making a decision and moving on. And when you're mixing down to 1 track and then erasing the ones you had previously, I mean, that's the ultimate in commitment, in decision making. It's gone, like, once you've done that. And that style of recording certainly set me up for, you know, the next stage, which was then moving digital and going on to digital 8 tracks and eventually to computers. I learned a lot in those early years, without a doubt. I'm really glad I had that experience, because sure.
I think of course, like the whole way I'm dreaming of like what we have now, but I'm able to recognize like what we've kind of given up to get what we got now. Like
Yeah.
we've got too many options, for instance, and we've got our recordings can be too clean and too perfect. And although that's all I ever wished for at the time, like I think some of the recordings I do now benefit from those old problems.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because you can use a 4-track these days if you want. You can get one off eBay and record on it, but it's an aesthetic decision. You're aiming for a lower fidelity of sound, and obviously in those times in the late 90s, you weren't doing that. You were trying to get the biggest, best, most professional sound you could possibly achieve. And now, obviously, that's much more easily achievable through other means. But yeah, I kind of miss those days sometimes too, just the immediacy of it. Back then, there was no lag between the songs I wrote and the songs I recorded. There was just, they were one. I wrote something, I recorded it in a day or two, and that was that. Now, as I'm sure you and others listening may have experienced, you end up with this long back catalogue of just fragments and ideas and half-finished projects and things like that, because the amount of time commitment that's necessary to commit to a project and see it through to a finished song, the price of entry to that is so much higher in terms of your time and energy. You tend to only elevate your ideas that you're supremely confident with to that level. I really enjoyed just in the past just recording things that weren't necessarily going to be the greatest song I ever wrote, but it wasn't a massive time investment. You could get it done pretty quickly, and that's something that's a bit lost these days, I think.
Yeah, well, when I was first starting, like you, like if you really needed to like take some care to make your sounds good, like because you were always fighting the fidelity of what you had. It was eventually just gonna sound lo-fi no matter what. Like you weren't going to get a studio quality or CD quality, as we would have said back then, recording.
Yeah.
So you really had to take care to get anything even near that. If we were recording a demo for our band, like we had to be careful, or else it's just going to sound like mud and noise. But
that's right.
When I got into doing it was really like when I got the ADAT machines, with the VCR tapes. That I kind of realized, like, wow, this, like, the quality is like pretty good now. And I think of course, like, paying attention to like things like mic placement and getting good levels and all that is important, but it was less important. I could spend less time worrying about it and still get a much better sounding recording.
Yeah, I mean, catastrophic failure is not as likely these days as it would be if you just put the mics in the wrong position and hit play on the 4-track and got it home and ended up with just something that was unsalvageable in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, so I think like sometimes I like to record like that, kind of just like haphazardly, where I'm not worrying about that, because as we kind of touched on a minute ago before we started recording, like you're trying to do so many jobs at once. You're engineer, your producer, your songwriter, your performer, you're doing everything at once, and to be constantly switching between that is a good way to kind of lose the feeling of the song and like forget like what you're doing. But that is the beauty of today too, is like we can still harken back to those days. Like you said, you can get your 4-track on eBay, although they've really gone up a lot in price because they've become, I think, more popular, especially like in looping, ambient music scenes. And there's a whole like DAW-less movement, and 4-tracks seem to be a big part of that.
Oh, right. Unfortunately, mine has died some years ago. I managed to digitize almost everything of what I'd done back in those days, but it finally gave up the ghost, and I parted with it quite sadly. But I've seen they're not that hard you have to pay obviously, but they're not that hard to find. Someone selling one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've parted with all the old recording mediums. There's a few things I regret, like 4 tracks, selling those. Who knows if it'd still work, but I do regret that. I regret selling a nice mixer that I had at one point, this big Tascam 24-channel mixer, probably
nice.
from the late 80s or something. But that became, I turned that into a laptop. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think at that time, I didn't know that I was going to miss some of that stuff. You know, it was like, well, I can do everything in a computer now. Like, I'm not going to need that giant mixer, which did take up a lot of room. And it had its own like problems. I remember like the last 2 channels didn't work. You know, probably could have got it serviced or whatever, but it just seemed like I'm going to be able to do all this stuff in the computer on Pro Tools. And
yeah, sure.
I'm not going to even need this stuff. But
yeah, I've certainly parted with a few things that I regret. But as we were talking about before, I've moved around a bit, and just practical necessity has caused me to shed a lot of gear and just cut down to the very bare necessities of what I need to produce the kind of sounds I want. But yeah, certainly it'd be nice to have some of that old gear back, but those days are gone.
Yeah, I didn't foresee the like nostalgia all that old stuff would have given me, and that I didn't know I was going to miss the dirtiness of my recordings when I went into the computer.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a lot of ways to recreate that, and a lot of the fun I have nowadays in recording is recreating the imperfections that I was so excited to get rid of in the past.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was in preparing for this, I was reviewing some of my old sort of recordings from like the mid to late thousands, and just, you know, there's some I like, there's some I still enjoy, there's others that I find challenging to listen to, and I think the ones that I don't get so much out of these days, I almost hear the worst of both worlds in a way, like a kind of on the one hand, just those typical rookie errors of over compressing, over EQing, over quantizing, just letting the power of the computer just go to your head, but also just not allowing enough of that rawness and spontaneity to come out, and I think that's something hopefully I've improved in over the years of being able to use the power of the DAW to make things really tight when they need to be, when that actually serves a song.
Yeah.
But also using that power to capture that spontaneity of just a different idea, a different vocal take, a different guitar solo, just something that doesn't sound so safe, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a good point, like serving the song. And maybe like the kinds of music that you're playing and the kinds of music I like to play, having a raw recording, having a kind of, maybe like, like what we said, like you have kind of like an indie rock thing going on, garage rock, and that kind of, when you start getting into those aesthetics of almost DIY, or like punk rock, or you don't want them sparkly clean, really.
Yeah.
But if you're doing like maybe like top 40 pop music or certain styles of like electronic music, you want things super tight, and
sure.
It's dance music, so it really needs that, or it's like something like pop music that needs to sparkle.
I found sometimes in my own songs it might need one thing or the other in the space of the same song, even.
Yeah.
For example, one thing I've started doing about 5 or 6 years ago is just taking off the click track, getting rid of the click track, and just playing. Obviously in some sort of time, but just letting the rhythm to just waver and drift a little bit naturally, and just playing, and then later going in and setting the tempo, like actually matching the tempo to what I've already recorded. And that's something, again, it comes back to serving the song, because if it's a kind of a loose song with a kind of a groove to it, like, you know, sort of early, that's all good, early, you know, Beck or beta band or stuff like that, you know, that can really be helpful, because then you can go in and with synths and with MIDI and drum machines and everything, and even if you quantize them, it's still going to have a nice loose kind of feel to it, because the tempo is kind of incrementally shifting up and down. And then I started to try that method on sort of driving pop songs, and it just didn't work, because inevitably you tend to slow down a bit, and it just doesn't capture what the song requires. So as you say, there's a time to have everything tight and sharp and on the beat, and other times you might just want to turn the click off and just play and see where it goes. Something I've found useful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been pretty into that idea too, of just playing and getting the feel. And for me, it'll probably start on drums or guitar. But you know, I have to be careful, because I'm not the best at nailing like you know, staying on time. You know, I tend to speed up and slow down emotionally in parts of the songs. But there is
it's about serving the song. Yeah, I mean, if the song kind of requires that or benefits from it, and you can hear pretty quickly if it doesn't, you know, like it's pretty obvious pretty soon if it's not the kind of song it is. But it's something I enjoy doing a lot.
I do find sometimes it's a little hard to record over those recordings, to like overdub. But I've been into this, like one of the features in live is you can, you know, normally you have a grid with your quarter notes and all your beats and everything, and everything follows the grid, but you can actually set it so the grid follows your performance.
Yeah.
And
can I? Yeah. I didn't mention before, but I don't use Live. I use Cakewalk, which is now, was previously its own company, then Gibson, and now by BandLab. And I think most DAWs have that feature where you can go in after the recording. And, you know, a great tip I've discovered that'll hopefully save you and others some time is, okay, after you've recorded your organic instrument and you want to match the tempo and tempo changes to that, I spent time just trying to look for the transients and look, okay, where does the beat need to go? A really simple way to just do that is put an extra audio track in and just mic your desktop or hitting your legs or whatever it is, and just run 3 or 4 takes of just playing the drums with your hands or whatever it is on your desktop, and then just go through, and you can clearly see, you know, if you say you've done 4 takes or 5 takes, like the middle hit in each hit is going to be your main transient, like your average one. And I found that's just given me so much better, cleaner results than trying to actually look at the audio, particularly if it's in a distorted in electric guitar and you can't really pick up the transients. I found that's a great way to do it. And then when you've got your tempo map, actually bringing in sort of MIDI and drums and loops and you know, tempo-based delays and everything just snaps to that grid. And that was also a challenge for me earlier on, is playing over the top of those things. But if you can get that tempo grid as accurate as it possibly can be, that solves a whole bunch of problems.
That's a cool idea, because like a distorted guitar just kind of looks like a sausage. It
does.
You know?
Yeah, sure.
It's a waveform. Whereas, like, you know, other instruments, it's like a drum. It's obvious, like that's the hit.
Yeah. Acoustic guitar is somewhere in the middle. Like you can sometimes see obviously where the transient is, and other times it's not so clear, or it looks like it should be there, but it just, when you put it in, it's not really where the sort of the heart of the beat is, you know what I mean? So that's certainly something I've found helpful. Look, it can be a little laborious to do, but I've set up certain, you know, just automated processes and macros and things like that to just get that done fairly quickly, and That's a technique I should use more often, actually.
That's a cool idea, especially like doing it a couple times, banging, and then just seeing like the middle is like about where it should be.
Yeah.
And
Well, if it's a 3-minute song and you do it 5 times, it's 15 minutes. You can even drink a coffee while you're doing it, and then you just know each midpoint. If you do it an odd number of times, it's going to be your beat. So
that's a cool sort of unconventional way to get that down or to use for chording even.
Yeah. I mean, I learned it the hard way though. So I discovered it after a long time of just trying to analyze transients in very flat web files and things like that. But
this kind of brings me to something I've been thinking about a little bit. Like when you play with other people, I think it's nice to have that looseness, and because you're all kind of going through it together and you're reacting off of each other, so you feel it and it comes across more natural. But if I'm doing a song where I'm starting on the drums by myself, I don't have any of those other references. I tend to go for the metronome most of the time and play along with that.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of curious what your process is, because your music sounds like a band, but I'm guessing it's you're playing everything.
Yeah, it's all me.
So you're doing all of these parts. What kind of process do you like to do? Like, what's the order of operations? Do you have like kind of a method? Start with an instrument.
Yeah. It's definitely evolved over the years. So as we mentioned before we started, there's always fragments of songs, like an idea here and there, and a chord progression and a melody over a chord progression, and from time to time, I want to elevate one of those songs to an actual bring it into the door and actually start to work with it and structure it and write lyrics and all those sorts of things. And I tend to start out with a fairly rough structure, so just demoing it in the door, and then that will gradually evolve into the finished product. I'll typically have a folder which has got all my demo parts in it, and then just mute that as a group as the new parts kind of come online. And that's where I really experiment with the arrangement, the structure, the lyrics. I try to really flesh out the idea in the door, and then just gradually replace parts over time. And I think I've gotten better at doing that over the years. As anyone listening to this will know, you hit certain roadblocks in that process, and an idea might sit half finished at a point, or 60 or 70% done, and it's really a challenge to bring it to that final point. But yeah, it's basically a process of incrementally removing demoed parts and replacing them with what's going to end up being the actual part. Sometimes I prefer the demoed parts and go back to them if they capture more of what I want to achieve. But that's basically the process. I don't have any particular set order in which I do things. I guess guitars probably come first, so there might be a scratch drum track over which the guitars go, and then the drum track will go, and the proper drums will go in. Vocals I tend to do towards the end, and they are without a doubt the hardest thing to do. It's a classic 80-20 situation. I mean, if the lead vocal is just substandard, there's nothing that will save the song. And I tend to put a huge amount of work into the lead. I find these days I can generally produce music that I'm more or less happy with in a reasonable period of time, like not in 4-track days time, but I get the music how I want it reasonably quickly. Most of the time it's the lead vocal that is the most challenging of all, that takes up the most of my time. And once that's done and I'm happy with it, the song is already more or less mixed as I go along in most cases.
Yeah, I've used that process too. Sometimes I'll record a guitar knowing I'm not really going to use it, and play the drums over that, just because it's easier for me to play the guitar on my own because that's more of the song, I guess. But like playing the
Yeah.
beat, it's easy to get lost and like forget how many times you did things and not be
Yeah,
sure even like what you want to do over it, because sometimes you just need to hear it. And a lot of times that stuff will get just re-recorded, like you said.
Yeah.
But
One
it
thing,
depends on the song, I suppose.
it does, yeah. One thing that was challenging with my music is in terms of my taste in music. I appreciate a lot of bands for their precision and their tightness. Other ones I appreciate for their looseness and their kind of like bands like Pavement, Velvet Underground. I wish it was possible for me to just sort of sing out of tune and play out of time, and it sounds $1 million, but it just doesn't. It sounds rubbish. And my taste in my own music that I make is very much toward the precise side, and that's something I think as I said before, I've tried to improve over the years, and think I've gotten better at. What I realized when I look back at older recordings was 9 times out of 10, it's a problem with the take. It's a problem with the quality of the performance, and all of us, we spend time just fiddling with levels and EQ and being unable to diagnose the problem. And now, like looking back on some of my early recordings, I can just see that, particularly at the level of like lead instruments, lead guitar, lead vocals, there was just kind of a lack of precision where there should be precision, and too much precision where it would have benefited the song to sort of be a little more freeform.
I wonder if that's you're your own worst critic kind of thing. Like
Oh, sure.
you mentioned like Velvet Underground, like one of my favorites, and sometimes Lou Reed, it almost sounds like he's just talking, like and it has really weird rhythms, if rhythm at all, and he does so much like falling away from the note, and I mean it's just it's great.
Yeah.
It's like he's one of my favorite vocalists in a lot of ways.
Me too.
But I wonder if we just have a hard time hearing ourselves to begin with. Everyone, the first time they hear their own recorded voice, kind of freaks out a little. And I wonder if it's harder to do that without another person telling you kind of like, oh no, that was cool, the way you did that was neat, it had an energy, it had an attitude.
That's one of the challenges, I think, of being the performer, writer, producer. Normally if you're a professional recording artist, you'd have someone in the at the desk saying, giving you feedback as you went along. That sounds great. No, you need to redo that. That could use a bit more of this. I don't know if you heard the Pixies podcast? They did a multi-episode podcast on the production of their most recent record, which was a really interesting look in behind the scenes. But what was fascinating about it is just that the role of the producer as the motivator, the negotiator, the influencer, the relationship manager. And you don't have that as a solo person. You just don't have that. You can only go by what you think sounds good and doesn't, and you get tired, you get fatigued as well. I mean, we know about fatigue. Most people know about fatigue in terms of certain frequency spectrums after a couple of hours of mixing that start to roll off. But I think fatigue also occurs at the level of your interest in your own song, your ability to hear pitch, your ability to think clearly about what arrangements work and what don't. That's the challenge of being a solo person. But I guess on the positive side, though, at least you can craft your songs in a way that where all the instrumentation is, in your own opinion, of course, serving the song. Like if you have a vision of a song where the bass and the drums don't come in for the first 4 minutes, you don't have to negotiate with a bassist and a drummer to achieve that. You can just do whatever you think serves the need of the song.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a point too about just the role of the producer. the traditional role of the producer. Like today, a producer, I think a lot of people think that's somebody that makes beats on their computer or something like that. But, it was always, a lot of the producers never touched the music. They were there
Sure.
kind of like as like a, like voice of reason, or like to funnel the artistic idea. Because that can be a really hard thing to do too, is to focus the idea into like a specific thing. But to have a producer to say like, that's a cool take, that fits the vibe of the song,
Sure.
we're gonna leave that mistake in there because that's like energy. You sound excited there, so that's more important than you hitting the note. But as an insecure vocalist, I know I could be like, oh, I don't know, like I could tell I'm a little out of tune there. But that might be the exact spot where all the emotion lies, and it's easy to miss that on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the changes, one of the improvements I've made over the years is become better at compositioning as well. Like, you comp, everyone comps, everyone listening to these compositions, I'm sure, but I realize now, looking back, that I perhaps wasn't compositioning in the right way or the right things or to the right level.
By compositioning, do you mean like putting a song together or putting takes together?
No, as in recording multiple takes and then selecting the best.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Comping, I guess.
So you might take like this line from take one and that one from take four.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And everyone does it, and I just realized I wasn't necessarily doing it enough or in the right way, or particularly with the lead vocal. I'd sort of record some takes, 3 or 4, and just pick maybe the best phrasings. But again, looking back, often what makes me listen to something and think that doesn't sound right, it doesn't sound like I want it to sound, it just might be something almost hard to perceive, like maybe a scratchy, stuttery sibilant or a consonant or something that just is in tune but just lacks any sort of, lacks the kind of feeling I want it to have. And I certainly comp a lot more at the level of the lead vocal than I ever did, and just not and in fact most instruments too these days, particularly percussive instruments, acoustic guitar, bass, things like that, I would normally just give them a couple of takes till I thought they sounded right. But just again, if the song is demanding that sort of very precise driving kind of feel, I will tend to comp even at that level. And the beauty of it is once you are much happier with the performance and it's where you want it to be, that for me removes the temptation for things like layering and doubling and all the stuff one did in the 4-track days, where you play the guitar parts a little bit out. So what I'm going to do? Well, I'll pan it to one side and then I'll double it and pan it to the left, and allowing your songs to have more impact by having less elements in there is something that you can do when you're just getting it right more often at the level of the take. And that's something I've certainly hopefully gotten better at over the years.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth, right? There's nothing better than a great performance. And that's just, I mean, it doesn't matter what plugin you have, like, just get it right. Garbage in, garbage out. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's not that performance, it might sound fine to someone else, but if you're listening to it and you've obviously got to be the final judge, and you've got to be happy with your own music before you put it out into the world. And there's just often elements in there that I just found just kind of distracting, that just didn't, that I wanted to replace. It could just be something as a breath in, or a sibilant, or a click, or a pop, or whatever, where the rest of the phrase was okay. So just comping to a final level of detail that I once did has certainly been a step forward for me.
Yeah, and it's a lot a lot easier to do these days than punching in and, or we're going to lose what we had before.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But again, you don't want to overcome the challenge is that again, with that producer in the room is giving you that real-time feedback. If you had that of what's working, what's not working, you can just focus on the bits that aren't working. What I tend to do these days is I tend to stick to around 5 takes, and I know when I've done that and when I've actually comped that's not going to get me there. That's only going to get me to a take which is about 75% there, but at least through doing that you can isolate. I found the sections of the song from a vocal performance point of view that are difficult, and you don't know that when you're singing. Like I think certain parts are going to be difficult, and you might nail it on the first take, and then other parts that are relatively simple for whatever reason it's just hard to get. And that sort of doing that first pass at it with approximately 5 takes per phrase or so just allows you to get to a point where at least you can isolate which are the ones, and there's always going to be a phrase or 1 or 2 phrases that are going to take up a huge amount of your time because they're hard to get. But at least you know what they are in the absence of having a producer in the room to tell you. And another thing I've found useful too is just using a pitch monitor too. I don't know if you've ever used one of them or heard of them, but there's free ones you can get for Android. I use one called Vocal Pitch Monitor, which doesn't do anything. It doesn't change the pitch, but you just have it on your phone and stick it there, and at least and particularly when you're fatigued and you're not detecting pitch that well, at least when you're doing your takes, from just the visual representation of the note that you're going to be getting 5 that are in the ballpark, and not just completely off. That's something I've found useful. That means you're not necessarily ending up with a series of takes, 10, 15, 20 layers. You want to keep it pretty compact, otherwise you'll just be exhausted before you finish the first phrase of the song, and just making sure the ones that actually end up on that 5 are at least in the ballpark is something I found helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because when you are trying to get a part right over and over again, I know I do. I start, now I'm thinking like very technically, and am I hitting the right note? Am I timing it right? Whatever. And the emotional part is sometimes lost. And,
sure.
Because you're trying to get it, and then you realize like, wow, I sang that, but it's like really boring.
Yeah. And sometimes you just haven't got it, and I mentioned, I think in the email to you, I use a lot of automations and macros and things like that, and just to stay in the zone. And when you haven't got a take, just to hit a big button and just immediately stop the recording, undo that, go back to where it started, give me half a second to draw breath, and then go again on the same level of the take. Whatever way I can do just to try and not interrupt being in the zone that you have to be in when you sing, is well worth setting up as a kind of a workflow improvement.
Can you explain that a little bit? So you said you set it up so that you can hit a button that'll just like kind of start. So I wasn't sure actually what you meant by macros. Was it like an actual little script or something that you have, or is it like shortcuts or something?
So I got very interested in workflow about 7 or 8 years ago. Before that, I wasn't that interested in it. I just sort of plowed in and followed the sort of the prompts of the program. But I've listened to your previous podcast about workflow and productivity improvements and keyboard shortcuts and all those things. I completely agree with. And at the time, I remember I had a problem I wanted to solve. I can't remember what it was, but I just wanted to break out of the logic that Cakewalk was sort of trying to direct me into, and it was a series of keystrokes I wanted to do. And I use a third-party program called perfect keyboard by Pitronek is the company. There's many other ones that do the same thing, and just what that enables you to do is maybe do many commands in succession. So, for example, I think one of the first ones I wrote was something. I mean, I was doing a lot of clip editing, and it was an incredibly laborious process. Cakewalk at that time was not as intuitively set up as it is now, and I was doing so much just cutting and switching tools and clicking and deleting that. And I just wrote a simple macro and just assigned it to the Z key, which basically just said, okay, where my cursor is, cut it there, move a little bit to the left, select that, delete it, move back to the right, select that, fade it, choose this tool and deselect everything, and you click a button and it does it in a split second. And I found that, that's just one example, but I found it really helpful to just sort of round out the last kind of 10% of the program in a way. Because so all doors have a certain logic to them. I'm sure it's the same in Ableton. There's a certain way it's set up and arranged, which is, works for most people most of the time. But I've always found there's just certain idiosyncratic ways of working that are the way I like to work. And at the time, sort of 7 or 8 years ago, there were things in Cakewalk that were just buried in submenus and kind of orientated around the mouse, where I would have just preferred to use the keyboard and things like that, where just being able to write commands that, particularly for those very laborious tasks, I mean, comping is laborious, enveloping is laborious, enveloping lead vocal is incredibly laborious, and trying to look at those tasks that just cause me the maximum amount of just mental friction and pain in the studio, and thinking of, okay, what can I do to just automate as much as I can of this, so it's just not such a burdensome thing to have to do. And yeah, that I don't use them. I still use them these days, not so much because the functionality of Cakewalk is improved a lot, but certainly there's plenty, like I described, that I have set up just in a way that suits my logic and my way of working, and it's certainly helpful for anyone who, it's not just they want to do a keyboard shortcut, they might want to do a series of them in succession, or it's a bit like if you're playing the guitar, and as you know, some of the great guitarists, they use Fender and Gibson and things like that, but they might make their own modifications and say, well, no, I want to switch just there, drill a hole, put it there, that's the way I think, that's where I want it. It's a bit like that, but in the DAW, basically.
Sometimes when I'm doing my sound packs or sample packs, there's a lot of tedious chopping clips up, like you said, or naming things, copying, and I find myself like doing these like key command like performances, be like Shift Command R, right arrow E, like you just kind of bang them out like you're playing an instrument. It becomes like this rhythmic thing, like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And I could see how it'd be really useful to just press one button and it'll just do like 30 of those in a row for you.
Well, and also I kind of treat the computer a bit like real estate as well. So, when you're doing those highly repetitive tasks, your primary is real estate. Obviously, you've got one hand on the mouse, and on the keyboard, you've got your A and your S and your Z and your X and your C. You've got these things that are just in really close proximity. And another few things I can certainly recommend that have helped me is on a Windows computer, just doing a little bit of registry tweaking. There's programs you can get to do this just to get rid of certain keys. Like I never use caps lock. I just got rid of it and assigned it to like an F13 or an F14 key that was then programmable. I moved the Windows key somewhere, I barely ever use that, someplace else, and that now serves as my delete key. And just treating that sort of space in the keyboard and close to your left hand as just really valuable territory to be working with. And if something is like a Control Shift Alt P and you're taking your hand off the mouse to go there, and you've got to do that many times, I mean, just to assign it to the Z or the X or whatever is really powerful. And with the mouse too, I mean, I use for many years I've used just gaming mice as well, like typically Logitech ones with typically that have programmable buttons and extra like a third click button and buttons you can utilize with your thumb, so you can just go through and without even needing to take your finger off the mouse, that you can just whack a button and that programs a macro, and it might do something like put 2 nodes in there and move to the right, then put 2 there and drag the whole thing down. And it's certainly, and for me it's not even about time saving. It certainly does save time, but it's more just about just mental clarity in your own track. Like in the studio, you don't think of the task that's ahead of you as being so burdensome as you would otherwise think of it, which means you're less likely to procrastinate doing it, which means you're more likely to finish the song or the Ableton pack or whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah, that's something I've never gotten into, the more complicated mouse.
I mean,
I'm using the trackpads. That's just what I got used to, and but I can see how having those like extra buttons could really make a difference.
It's only really if you perceive there's a problem that needs to be solved. Like I had some problems I needed to solve, and that's why I got into it. I didn't just get into it for its own sake. I had specifically things I wanted to do a certain way that annoyed me that I couldn't do a certain way. If you're working inside your programs and you don't see there being anything that you want to change, it's not necessary for to go down that path. Only if you're seeing problems you want to solve, or things where the door is pushing you in one direction but you want to go in another direction. A good example is for me, there's times to look at music and times to not look at it, as in not look at the waveforms. And I've found also when comping, I much prefer, I don't like using the mouse to sort of flick through the different comps because I'm looking at the waveform. I find the waveform distracting because it's visual input when I want to be hearing audio, and I found it easier just to look away from the screen and just assign my like numbers 1 to 10 buttons to just hit the different lanes when I want them, and just close my eyes and then just hit the numbers without looking at the screen, that just take it to the level I want and play it where I want. And just removing that visual element helps me hear better, like which really is the better take. Whereas I might hear it and look at it and think, well, that waveform looks a bit whatever to me, I'm not going to use that one, where it's irrelevant. The only thing relevant is how it actually sounds. So it's just little things like that. But only worth doing if there's a problem that you need to solve with your DAW and the way it works for you, I think.
Well, I guess it's just something I've never really thought about as being a possible solution. So, I do find myself occasionally doing these, like I said, these like kind of like rhythmic key commands, like repeated string of key commands to get something done. And
I mean, most macro programs will sort of respond respond to the scope of the program. So if you're in a particular program, it knows, okay, we're in this program, and the Z and the X and the C and the A and the S key are going to do these things. And then if I'm in a different program, they'll do different things for that program. And certainly, it's not just about using that as a tool, but also I spend a lot of time just sort of thinking about the way I made music, and just walking at lunchtime and just thinking about which are the processes that just cause me the most amount of suffering in the studio, and that I reliably procrastinate, and just why are they problematic for me? Like, what is it about them that I dislike so much, and how can I actually improve on them? And sometimes that's easy enough to do within the scope of the DAW. Other times I just find it's helpful to just do things the way I want to do them. Like just like hit a key and just a sub-menu comes up with the commands I like to see when I hit that key. Stuff like that. It's just good for those sorts of things.
That's cool. That's something I've given very little thought to. I love mapping things to like MIDI controllers, or even you can do like map things in live to like specific keys on your keyboard. Can be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I as I said, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you've said in the previous episodes about just organization. That's a big thing as well over the years. Just organization, just getting into getting into your song and just feeling at home in your song. And as you've said many times, just your templates, your naming, your presets, your drop-down menus of synths and effects, just spending a little time curating them from time to time is valuable. Icons too, like just a really simple thing I did a couple of years back was just replaced the stock icons in Cakewalk with just some pictures of my actual instruments. So I'm quite a visual person, and just seeing my Sunburst Fender Cyclone there, as opposed to just a photo of an electric guitar. Just it's little things. It's so small, but it just helps me feel anyway, just at home in my own song and not opening it up and just thinking, well, what the hell's going on here? I don't know where anything is. I don't know what to do next. And it's also a great thing to do when you're feeling uncreative too, isn't it? I mean, sometimes you want to do something musical, but you're just not inspired, and spending that time just curating some of your templates and track templates and song templates is, there's always something to go on with, isn't there?
Yeah, and those are like, in a lot of times, like the kind of tedious, they're not as fun as like making a really hot 8-bar loop all the time, but you're not always like in that mood. But I do find a lot of times it's a way to like fall into the mood. You're kind of doing this thing where I'm playing, all right, what am I going to put in this like favorites folder? And you open the plugin or something, and then you're like, oh wow, that's a cool sound. And next thing you know, I'm like, you've started
I
thought I didn't want to do this, but here I am, like feeding off inspiration.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes
absolutely.
You get lucky.
And there was actually a song on my last record that the working title for many, many months was Delete. Because when I want to try out a new synth or a new plugin, I don't want to save the track, I just want to try it out. And so I titled it Delete, so I had to delete it later. And exactly what you said just happened, and it sort of turned into something. And I think I eventually renamed it, but the working title was Delete for a good couple of months. Yeah.
That's cool, though. So, are you working on anything now? Any new music? Are you, I guess, like, these days, I don't know what life is like for you on a daily basis. Do you have more time to do work, or?
It's interesting. I am working on some things at the moment. I'm working on a 4-song EP. I tend to work, probably not the best way of working, but I have something new, like completely new, that I'm writing now, completely new composition. Then I might be working on something old, like restoring a 4-track recording or reworking an old song. I try to sort of switch it between those two. So I'm working on 4 songs at the moment. My time is pretty limited. I have 2 young kids, and as I think I mentioned in my email, I don't often have the most optimal recording environments to work in, and pretty minimal equipment. But I think one thing I've definitely improved at over the years is just learning how to use those little snippets of time that you're able to steal away better, like even 20 minutes here or 15 minutes there, get a few vocal tracks down and just get a mix down done or things like that. So I'm making new music at the moment, but it's a slow process. Like I had my last record, which is called Award-Winning Movie Themes. I can't remember how many songs. I think there's 10 songs on there. They were in just varying stages of completion for 4 years. I was just incrementally working away at them when I had time, and just trying to stay motivated, trying to just keep on track to complete them. And that's probably what I'll be doing with these 4 songs as well, I imagine.
So suppose you have that half hour that pops up out of nowhere. Um, do you have maybe like, do you keep like a list or something of like, this is what I can be doing next time, or what? How do you make the most of that? Because
Yeah,
sometimes half hour goes by just trying to think about what I'm gonna do.
yeah,
What should
sure.
I do? And
Well,
then I wasted my half hour.
another spooky coincidence between the two of us is I'm also very much into getting things done as a methodology, and I know you are too. And I don't specifically apply that to my music in terms of having lists and things like that, but certainly I apply the general principles. And one of the key principles, as I'm sure you know, is always know what your next action is for a project, whether a musical project or what's the next thing I need to do. And if I know with this song, okay, the next thing I need to do is the bass guitar, I find that it's valuable for me to make sure everything is as set up as it can be for me to do that. Like for example, if I'm going to open up a project, have I left it and saved it in a way that the bass track is at the top or the other tracks are hidden, it's armed, it's recorded, it's ready to go. In my house in Melbourne, my instruments just piled up high on these sort of steel shelves, and do I have the bass guitar down? Have I opened it? Have I put it on the guitar stand and plugged it in? And is it as ready to go as it can be? I agree with you. You can spend that half an hour very easily just faffing around and trying to work out what you're doing, and so yeah, certainly leaving things as set up as they can be, and knowing what the next thing you need to do is, and disciplining yourself to do it, even if you don't want to do it. I may not want to play bass guitar, but just disciplining yourself to do the next thing you need to do, and just having it as set up as possible is the best tip I can give. And it's interesting with the whole theory of context, which is the heart of getting things done as well. I kind of know what I need to do depending on what the situation is. Like at the moment, I have the apartment to myself. Were I not, we're talking now where we're not doing this, I'd be recording vocals, or anything I can do where I need the loudspeakers. If I'm programming MIDI, well, I don't need to do that out loud. I can do it in the headphones. I can do it some other time. So it's about sort of just recognizing what availability, what context you're in, and then what's available for you to do. And because I've been doing it for so long, I kind of know what I need to do depending on what sort of situation I have, whether it's I've got the apartment to myself, or I don't, and I can do things on headphones. That's how I try to make the best use of that time. Don't always succeed, but I try.
No, but you are increasing the chances of success.
I think a big thing too is what you don't do as well. For example, like I don't, for many years I haven't watched TV. I just don't watch TV at all. And I used to, like, I've got no grand objection to TV or anything like that, but at the moment I work part-time. I use in Melbourne. Previously I worked full-time as an occupational health and safety and mental health trainer, and often in the evenings, you're exhausted. Like after a day of training, you're pretty spent, and then obviously 2 young kids and everything that goes with that, and getting them to bed, and you may just end up with a snippet of time, like an hour or 2 of time in the evening you have available for music, and you're not in the greatest headspace to do it. It's so much easier just to sort of kick back and just relax and watch TV. But I just have ruled it out. And it's not because I don't like TV. I mean, some great stuff I'd like to see, but I just know, like as with all kind of habit formation theory, you'll end up following the path of least resistance. So for that reason, I don't have a TV, we don't have Netflix, we don't have anything like that, because just I just know myself well enough to know that if I got into that groove, making music would just become this perpetual future thing that would just never actually eventuate. It would just be something I was just always planning to do. So I certainly agree with you about making music even when you don't want to. There's times I just desperately don't want to, but at the end, we only have those 24 hours in a day, and you just got to do the best you can with the time and the limited resources you have.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you do have like the easy option, and I slip down that slope all the time, but it's like sometimes it's got to be a decision, like what do I want to have said I did with my day?
Sure.
I'm going to look back on today and I'm going to say, oh great, I laid around and watched TV for 7 hours, and there are certain days where I'm okay with that,
Sure.
But in general, like, no, that's not what I want to look back on.
I thought your episode about the eulogy was really powerful. I mean, for a music production podcast to be talking about that it's really relevant, and you've almost got to do a eulogy for your day as well as your life, really. Did I spend the time in a way that I think was valuable and it has moved me toward the things I want to do and want to accomplish. Sometimes you've got to make hard decisions and rule out certain things that would be much more pleasant to actually do in the moment, and just bite the bullet and just, as you say, make music even when you don't want to.
Well, I like your idea of, and this is, it's definitely like a getting things done kind of thing, of the context. Like, it's one thing to have a huge to-do list, but it quickly becomes overwhelming. But if you have like a to-do list when I'm at my computer, or when I can be loud, or when I need to be quiet, or when I don't have energy, then your options are just nicely categorized. So like you said, like, you got this time where, like for me, like to do like vocals, like I kind of don't really want anyone to hear that. I don't really want to like let people know what that actually sounds like. and a lot of it,
I'm with that. I'm sick of that.
It's me. It's my head. It's like I can let go a little more.
Sure.
Without
absolutely
knowing there might be someone around that's like overhearing whatever's going on.
Particularly if you're repeating a phrase, if you're singing the same phrase again and again and again, it's embarrassing, it's pretty embarrassing. But fortunately, in our house in Melbourne, we lived in what's called a terrace house, like a very long, thin, narrow house, and it was possible. My wife's a dancer, and it was possible in the evenings with a number of doors closed. I could actually make noise in the back part of the house, and the kids would sleep, and she could practice in the front room, and we actually had that possibility. Now in a very small apartment in Berlin, obviously you've got to wait for people to be out of the house, and then just you get to it, and you got 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes just to do as much as you possibly can. But at least you know what you have to do and what you have to get on with if you've organized yourself, and you kind of know what's the next process in this track. And it's usually something very laborious, like comping vocals or enveloping vocals, and which gets back to just trying to make those processes as efficient as they possibly can be.
Yeah. It's kind of like laying out your clothes the night before work, so you
a
can
bit
just,
of that, yeah.
You know what you're going to wear, so you can just sleep a little longer and jump right into the day.
Well, it's one of the key ideas behind the psychology of habit formation, that you just don't rely on willpower. You can't just sit there and go, well, I'm really going to work on this song and I really want to do it. And you've got to manipulate your environment, your context around you, so you almost like fall in to the activity and just get over that difficult hump, which is actually just getting into it. Once you're into it, you're okay, but it's that difficult sort of deciding to do it, getting over those first 10 minutes of, oh God, I really don't want to do this. And just trying to minimize that psychological effect as much as possible by just having things, set up, organized, both in the door as well as in the physical environment as well.
Yeah, that's kind of where the make music even when you don't want to thing came out of. Because getting started is like kind of the hardest part, like deciding to do it with everything, really, like
Yeah, it
making
is.
that
Sure, sure.
change. But like music making, I imagine anyone that's doing it does it because they like it at its core. It's fun, they enjoy it. And I think once you get past that, like forcing yourself, like 9 times out of 10, you get excited about it.
Oh
You
yeah,
go, oh,
sure,
this is something I
sure.
like to do. That's right. And
You
so
got to
many
find a
things are like
line.
that.
You got to find some sort of line back to those early days in a way, just that the incredible excitement of just laying one track over the other and just feel the connection back to that first time you got excited about making music. All these other things, like how many people listen to you, how many people like your music and are moved by it. These are all really nice to have. I find I like it when people listen to my music and save it and comment on it. But I think ultimately that is a nice to have. It can't ultimately be what sustains you. You've got to just sort of find a connection back to your love of making it in the first place, and whatever happens from there in terms of success, recognition, appreciation, things like that is all just a bonus as far as I'm concerned.
And they're all things you really have no power over.
Yeah,
And
you absolutely not. I mean, you can. Some people make money off music. Some people achieve critical acclaim. Some people just have a passion for making it, and those three things can go together or exist independently of each other. And just finding a way to hold on to the things that got you excited about making music in the first place is, what keeps me going and keeps me using that spare very little time, half hour here or there, to just keep doing what I do.
That's cool. That's the secret, right?
That's it. Staying motivated.
Nice. Well, listen, it's been awesome talking to you. I'm not sure. Is there anything we wanted to get to still? 'Cause I like a lot of these thoughts here. The things I'm gonna keep in mind myself. I think especially the knowing what you're going to do thing is like a good reminder I needed to hear, because like everyone, I've got a bunch of various things that are in various stages of completion, and to just have like the plan beforehand, before the time comes, because I waste a lot of time deciding what I'm going to do when I get the time to do something. Like suddenly I have an hour, say, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I'm like negotiating with myself. I'm weighing the options, and so much time goes by, and a lot of like stress, and my confidence in whatever decision I make is non-existent.
Yeah, I
like
get that sometimes. Yeah.
But to have that planned out, it's so important. I used to do it a lot more than I do now, or the night before I would like kind of, all right, if I do these things tomorrow, I'll be happy. And just to take 5 minutes doing that is so valuable. I've kind of drifted away from that somehow.
Yeah, but I think the great thing with getting things done and similar methodologies is you can drift out and then drift back in. There's times I've been pretty lax with it, and other times where I've been a little more just seeing the benefits it brings. And I have the same thing as well, like what to do with that hour of time, how to best use it, and that nagging feeling that no matter what you're doing, you perhaps should have been doing something else. That's hard. That's really hard to get over with. But with just good planning and organization and just, as I said, just knowing what I need to do next in a particular song, and just trying to discipline yourself to do it whether you want to or not. And still leaving room as well for spontaneity. Sometimes you might just want to just ditch the part you had to do and just work on something completely new. You can't be totally regimented with it, right?
Well, I think that's when you can let inspiration take over. You know what I mean? Like, I think as like artists, we can think like it ought to be inspiration based, but It's really like a lousy thing to rely on. But if you have your
Sure,
plans, you know, you got your things that you know you want to do, and that need those next actions that need to happen. And then if surprise comes along, you know, go with it, follow that, you know, because that's special. But most of the time, that's really not going to happen, from my experience. You know, inspiration
yeah.
pops up here and there, but I'd
They're
be
rare
much better
moments, you know.
served. Yeah, I'm better served when I have the plan, and then
Yeah, sure.
instead of the other way around, where sometimes I get into these states where I'm waiting for inspiration more and relying on the plan less.
Yeah, yeah. The only other thing I'll mention is I decided about a year ago. I decided to just make what I do available just under like a Creative Commons BY license, like an attribution license. So what came to that was how I came to that was from time to time I'd release just small things on freesound.org, just to sort of punctuate releasing songs, because releasing songs takes a long time, and sometimes it'd just be a sketch or a fragment or an element of a song I'd extract and just releasing just for free to use on Freesound, and just some of the things I got involved with, some of the projects that use some of my music, I just found so nice, so inspiring, that I decided just to make my entire sort of body of work available to anyone who wants to use it in that way, just sort of free to use with attribution. And there's one particular project I can shoot you the link of that a Spanish filmmaker made about her time under lockdown in I think Bilbao was the city, with her family, and she used some of my music in the end of it, and it was just a really just beautiful little piece, and a lovely kind of just accidental collaboration, and I like to work with other people in that way, and so if anyone likes what they hear, they're welcome to use it in any the way, shape, or form they like. It's I like people just taking my songs and just using them, interpreting them in any way they find useful.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I love when people tell me they use the sounds I make in something, and I get to hear
It's nice.
maybe
Yeah.
some instrument I made or recorded, and kind of having its own little life now. It's like you send it off in the world, and oh wow, look what came back. I hear very little really, but it's just cool. It's in a way I mean, I guess like what you're saying is like providing like more pieces of music, which is even a bigger thing. But just like that documentary, for instance, would be totally different with something else. But you've got your work in there, and I get a similar kick out of it. I wonder if this song would have been a little different without that sound.
Yeah, that's great. It's wonderful to be able to share and collaborate in those sorts of ways. For some people, it's collaborating directly in the music, and for others, it might be a pack you've written, or a song, or a fragment of a song, or an instrumental version of a song that just ends up in some project and just augments it really nicely. That's something I just look forward to doing more of, just working with interesting people with interesting ideas who just find ways to interpret what I've done in a way that might just complement what they're doing.
I think it's a cool way to make some use of all those unfinished projects we all have too. Just put it out there. I'm not. What good is it doing on my hard drive, gathering dust?
Yeah, that's right. It's a good way just to release stuff as well. Like it might not be ready to go out on Spotify or Apple Music or SoundCloud or anything like that, but just just something, an idea or fragment. Maybe you're not going to take it further. I find Freesound's just really, really helpful for that. And really interesting things, interesting projects come of it from time to time.
Yeah, and that might be a good purge to do one day, 1 week or something, just to go through the old stuff and be like, okay, let's just clear it out.
Clear it out. Yep.
That's one of the things I love about releasing anything, really, whether it's a pack or a song or tutorial, even like, or podcast. It's just like,
A podcast, yeah.
Okay, that's done. That's away. That's out now.
Yeah,
it's on its own. The bird has flown the nest, and it frees up the nest for new birds.
Yeah, and it's hard, particularly if you have perfectionistic tendencies, as I do. It's hard to let go, but yeah, eventually you just surrender, you relinquish it, you let it go, and just. I've gotten better over the years, I think, at doing that. I mean, it's been actually quite cathartic for me to release some older material. Like, I mean, on my Bandcamp, there's sort of series of demos and things I recorded, and for many years I had just grand aspirations that one day I'm going to re-record these and they're just going to sound perfect, and it's never going to happen, and I've got too much on my plate now. It's so much I want to do musically still, like new things, and just to sort of part with them, just send them off, edit them a bit, say goodbye, has actually been just really cathartic to let them go.
Yeah, I love that feeling.
It's a good feeling.
The next day or two are nice, usually lower pressure.
Yeah, that's right. And as you say, it makes space for new things. When you've that last record of mine, the award-winning movie themes, was particularly hard just to bring to that final point. And just when I got it released, when I got it onto the platforms and just said goodbye to it, that was a weight off my mind, because you got the sunken cost problem. You invested so much time into it and just over years, and just to finally click send is just it's a good feeling, as you say.
Yeah, you can just like run around in celebration.
That's it.
That's cool. All right, you got me feeling psyched.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah. Just okay. Let's do it, because it's a great feeling to let those things go. It's letting go. It's releasing. Like the term we think of as like it's a new release, but like the idea of it's like something you've let go. It's a burden you've shed. It's
yeah. It sure is.
The word applies on a few levels.
And your podcast on being prolific as well also made the good point that you release, and in every kind of cycle of songwriting and recording, I mean, not everything's going to be great. Like in every sort of cycle of writing and recording that I've done in my life, there's always a handful of songs that I really enjoy. I like listening to. I love them as much as the music that inspired me to make music. And then there's those couple that are just unlistenable, that you just never want to remember that you ever wrote. And then there's all the stuff in the middle, all the stuff that's the solid B plus, the C minus, that just didn't quite work out, or part of it did, but this part of it didn't. But hopefully with every sort of thing you put out, there might just be one or two songs, or just things that in your own mind stand the test of time. That's what I hope anyway.
Yeah, and I think even just for ourselves personally, it will stand the test of time, even just as a kind of almost like a photo album of just where you were.
Do you enjoy listening to your own music?
Yeah, usually. I mean, sometimes I need a break, but yeah, I mean, that's honestly like one of my favorite things is I love my music. No, but like
it's good.
No, I'm joking a little bit, but like I love when I finish something and then putting it on like in the car the next day and just kind of sitting back and like getting to hear it. And there's certainly things like I cringe over and I don't like, and it either exposes my musical weaknesses or I feel like I could have done a better job. But I love having something, just even if it's like a rough mix, or sometimes that's almost enough for me. enough musical satisfaction to just, oh, that was a cool jam last night, and just
Yeah.
leave it at that. I enjoy that a lot, and it's good because sometimes you're the only one that ever hears it anyway. So, even if you want
Yeah,
people
that's
to
true.
hear it.
That's true. I've got a lot of things that I've not released and probably never will. That's just for me.
It's not usually, though, I like to put it on for people. Like, that's a little different,
That's
like,
different. Yeah.
but I'd like the next day or after the fact to just like, okay, I put this thing on SoundCloud or Apple Music or whatever, and like, let's listen to it off that service. I'm gonna hear it. I'm gonna listen to the Apple Music version. It's just kind of cool. It's
Yeah. No, I agree. It's nice. It's nice. One of the
it's a
really
victory.
one of the most beautiful things has happened in recent years is my a few years back, my father listened to all my music, like just everything you see on Bandcamp. He just listened to it song by song. Like really sat down and listened to it. It's sort of something that it's an area of my life that my parents haven't historically had a great deal to do with or a great level of interest in. But yeah, just that was quite a moving and important and interesting thing for me, that he really sat down and went like line by line through it and made comments and gave summaries and analysis and things like that. And I also don't put my music on for other people, really ever, particularly the people closest to me. And on the occasions I have, it's a nervous moment, and have someone so close to you sort of go through it line by line was certainly interesting and moving and valuable experience for me.
Oh, I bet it's a really cool thing, and also scary thing.
The little history there. I mean, I won't go on about it too much, but in sort of in the 90s, going back to those times, it was a bit of a point of tension, I think, in the household, particularly when I was still living at home, that just my tastes, the things I was into, the things I enjoyed listening to, and my parents' tastes, particularly my father's, just were chalk and cheese. I mean, you just couldn't get further apart. He just found a lot of the music I listened to and is just an abomination. And so, when I sort of was clearly progressing down that path, it was clearly something I was passionate about. It wasn't going to be just like a sort of a fad. There was some tough times without a doubt. So to sort of close the loop on that and have him just sort of listen and appreciate. I'm sure he didn't like everything he heard, but just listen and appreciate and just go through it in such detail was really gratifying.
Yeah, I get that, and just it's so much of your time and your energy and the things you think about. That's cool. And yeah, I mean, like, so much of the music I make too, like, some of it is like, there's always, I guess, like, something personal and deep, but there's also not, a lot of it is not how I feel or not really who I am, but it's like just kind of an exploration. So
yeah, I mean, if
I
you're
don't
writing
like
a novel, you would create characters and write stories.
I do that in songs a lot. A lot of the singers in my songs are like characters going through like, their exaggerations or there's, I guess, the whatever of something comes through, but I don't like when people try to make like one-to-one connections of like, oh, you're singing about this thing. And I mean, sometimes you are, but it's like you don't read too deeply into it.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. Less of a problem now than it was perhaps in the past, when I think like lyrics are very important to me, and lyrically over the years, my songs have perhaps been more guided by certain phonetic things I want to achieve, or that is guided things a bit more. Like in days gone by, certainly there were perhaps a little more direct, a little more but never, as you say, like you're inhabiting a character, never directly autobiographical in most cases. But
yeah, phonetics. Like I mean, like sometimes it's how the lyric sounds. It's how it fits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That might drive that might drive a particular lyric, which then informs what the rest of the song ends up being about. That tends to be the way I write, certainly these days.
Yeah, I like doing that too. I like kind of letting the melodies and the sounds of the words kind of help me, Kind of find.
It's been a long time. It's been many, many years since I would have had a set of words and said, okay, these are my words, I'm going to put them to music. That hasn't happened for a long time. It's typically been music first, and then, as you say, that it sort of informs the lyrical content more than it used to, certainly.
Yeah, similar boat, yeah.
A lot of similarities.
It's cool. On other sides of the world, there, it's nice, to see that. That's something that one of the great things of the internet and like this age, and how you can share your passions and with other people and find out, you're not in your town. You might be an oddball, but in the worldwide community, there's a lot of towns with a lot of oddballs, and it's a whole community. Sure. Yeah, so it's nice, and it's cool we got to connect over that.
Yeah, likewise.
So is orphantrainproject.bandcamp.com the best place to send people for you?
That's the home at the moment. That's where the majority of my things are. There's things on there that I don't necessarily release on the major platforms. Most of the newer recordings I've done in recent years, some of the singles, most of my albums are also on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, all those locations.
Yeah.
But Bandcamp's the main home where I am at the moment. And as I said previously, Creative Commons licensed. If anyone wants to use it in a project, they're welcome to. Instrumental things too, like if there's a particular song, like a lyrical song where someone wants to just use a snippet or an instrumental version of it. I've really enjoyed collaborating with people in that way, so just reach out, contact me, and
cool.
That's just my little small contribution to the world of music.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and there are, all different kinds of people making all different kinds of music with all different kinds of talents. And, you're supplying this that might be just the exact piece the puzzle needs. Yeah,
could be. It's always fascinating just to see how people are going to use it. That's something I certainly love to do more of. But nice. Bandcamp is the main home where my things live.
Okay, cool. And then the various streaming services that we all use.
And the various streaming services, yeah.
So Orphan Train Project.
That's it.
Nice. Well, cool. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's great.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. I think people will dig it. And if you do, go to orphantrainproject.bandcamp.com or on Spotify, Apple Music, and whatever else people are using these days. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and have a great day.